welcome to another Rusty Rails Rail Fanning Adventure. On today's Rail Fanning Adventure, we take a look inside the Bob Julian Roundhouse. The Bob Julian Roundhouse is located at the North Carolina Transportation Museum. It was built in 1924, which makes this the 100th year anniversary of the Roundhouse. The Bob Julian Roundhouse replaced the original roundhouse, which was located at Spencer Shops, which was a 15-stall roundhouse, which was built in 1896, along with an obsolete 60-foot turntable. In its place, they would construct a massive 37-stall roundhouse with a 100-foot turntable that could accommodate the more modern steam locomotives that the Southern Railway had. Each of the 37 stalls had a depth of 106 feet, long enough to house the Southern Railway's largest steam locomotives. 9 of the stalls were equipped with pits and drop tables for changing out wheels, which were rolled to and from the wheel set shop through the doors on the back wall. In stalls not used for changing wheels, a shallow pit ran between the rails for most of the stall's length, allowing workmen to get underneath the locomotive and inspect them. Unlike modern-day diesel locomotives that can equally run well in either direction, most steam locomotives were designed to pull trains only in one direction, which meant the locomotive often needed to be turned to face the right direction that they would leave, the adjacent Spencer yard. Thus, the center of the roundhouse was a new 100-foot turntable, and all roundhouse tracks radiated from it. The Southern Railway spared no expense in constructing the Bob Julian Roundhouse and turntable. The estimated final cost of the project, completed in December of 1924, was an approximate of $500,000. The equivalent of $500,000 back in 1924 today would be $9,132,514.62. With most of the Spencer Shops complex closed and abandoned by 1977, the North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources proposed the concept of creating a museum at the site that would focus on the state's transportation history. The Southern Railway found this concept attractive and donated most of the old back shop and its land to the state for the project. After the completion of Linwood Yard, 2 years later, the company donated the remaining buildings and 57 additional acres of land. The Department of Cultural Resources, now the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, along with non-profit support organizations, the North Carolina History Corporation, now known as the North Carolina Transportation Museum Foundation, began the long task of finding the funds needed to restore and rebuild the shops, as well as locate historic items for display. While some critical work was done soon after the acquisition that enabled the North Carolina Transportation Museum to open in 1980, the funds needed for renovations were slow in coming. Area volunteers stepped up to do all they could, contributing thousands of hours to the effort. Restoration finally began on the Bob Julian Roundhouse and Turntable in 1994. With the help of grants and funds from the Intermodal Service Transportation Efficiency Act, along with a fundraising campaign called Building on the Past, Looking to the Future, showcased the museum's role as an economic tool, resulting in a large number of public donations to the Roundhouse project. In the end, the North Carolina Transportation History Corporation, now the North Carolina Transportation Museum, state government, individuals, corporations, and foundations pumped in some $8 million into the project to revitalize the Roundhouse, the turntable, and other areas of the museum. As work continued through 1995, the state awarded the project an extra $1.6 million. The revitalization of the Roundhouse and turntable was completed in 1996. The museum and its collection have continued to grow and develop, while the equipment used on the museum's on-site train ride are maintained in the Roundhouse. The Bob Julian Roundhouse now features an orientation gallery, rolling stock on display, an aviation gallery including a full-size replica of the White Brothers Flyer, a Spencer's Workers exhibit in the former washrooms, where workers once cleaned up, the office where employees received work orders, and over 8,000 square feet of exhibit space. In the still active stalls where visitors can view volunteers working on the museum's rail equipment, and the completely restored 100-foot turntable. Rides on the turntable are available, but the locomotives still have priority. Now, let's take a tour of the Bob Julian Roundhouse.
sturdy enough to accommodate the motor's weight and vibrations. The craft weighed 700 pounds and came to be known as the Flyer. The Wrights further redefined the wings by covering the bottom surfaces with fabric. This resulted in a smoother overall wing surface, which enhanced its aerodynamic efficiency. The brothers continued to apply the fabric in the direction of the wing at a 45-degree angle to increase the stiffness of the wings. One of the most innovative aspects of the 1903 Flyer was its propeller. The Wrights decided to treat the propeller as if it were a rotating wing. They reasoned that the same physics that generated an upward force or lift
like, if you spent over a certain amount, you got a pin or you got whatever. So I got a pin set that went out a lot. I think like Hammerhead and the anniversary of Ethereum came out. So it's a two-pin thing where it's got a smart marine and a chaos.
What's the note of the numbers?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they're counting the numbers.
I don't know because some of the numbers are repeated. And some of
Okay,
them are
right, yeah,
not.
501, 501.
And some of them are not.
Thank you.
And also,
Say again.
North end of the track.
like that. But I think if the trains were running today, I would still be on there, and I'm sure some of the others, because we were very, very dedicated. We loved that job. But that was the last run. And that's a sad story.
Back in the late 1800s, when mail was carried across this nation by trains of mail wagons, a small dog made most of history. His name was Boy, and this is his story. On a busy day at the Albany Post Office in 1888, small boy that Bobby accepted ours, gave himself running air on legal pouches, and soon was followed by mailbag.
Assigned to car number 48, Richardson worked for approximately 3 years aboard a European hospital train, whose cars were fashioned after those that traditionally carried civilian passengers.
In the early part of the war, we would go to the battalion aid station, which was the first source of medical treatment. And then we would, those who were capable of being hauled on a train would be loaded on our train, and we'd haul them to hospitals in Belgium and France, and some of them went into Holland.
Hospital trains weren't only a feature of foreign battlefields, they were also used stateside to transport injured soldiers arriving in ports on both coasts to hospitals throughout the United States.
The hospital ships would come into Charleston, unload, and all the patients, all their soldiers were taken to our Stark General Hospital. They're sorted out as to what kind of need they further need and where they live. And then they would make up 5 trains. One would go to New Orleans in Texas. One would go through Atlanta and the West Coast. One would go to Chicago and the far north, like Minnesota. And one would go straight up to New York. And I would be on one of those trains in charge of the patients.
Once patients were loaded aboard a hospital train, all of their needs were able to be attended to in a single car. Kept warm in the winter with a steam heating system, and cool in the summer with ice air conditioning, the cars were designed for passenger comfort. Even the food won rave reviews.
Our food service was excellent. We had the best food you could ask for.
Constantly in transit, hospital trains picked up what they needed along the way.
We'd be flagged down at a certain ROV station, and then they would give us what we were entitled to at that time. It was all prepared and handed to us on the road.
These hospital unit cars were used to manage the last of the casualties from the European theater. At the end of the conflict in this region, the cars transported not only American GIs, but also concentration camp victims.
After the war ended, we were required to go into Eastern Germany and load a full load of displaced persons, DPs. Most of those went into Holland, and then they were dispersed from Holland to where they had to go.
When the European conflict ended, the hospital trains were then sent to the West Coast to assist with the transportation of injured soldiers arriving from the Pacific until 1946.